Hi there to you, I'm Jennifer Kirk, welcoming you back to the channel, up here to the loft on Weir Yard. And today I've got a locomotive in for box opening and review. It's the Heljan Class 15. Now this is a model that's been out on and off for quite a while now. It's not a completely new model, but I've found a source of these at a really great price, and actually these are new old stock. We've got a link in the description box down below if you like the look of what you see today. I want to go and dig one of these out for your own collection, but it's one which has been a glaring omission in my fleet, so the price was right and I couldn't resist it. So come with me in association with the channel sponsor, Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories. And we're going to be reviewing this model, and of course, as always, we're going to be doing a full DCC fitting guide with Trainomatic with a suitable decoder. And if you like the look of this as well, we've got a link in the description box down below to Tramfabrique, who are the UK stockists of the Trainomatic range. But I'm really looking forward to show you this. It's been a locomotive that I've been really wanting to add to my collection, and now I have. This is the model. Now it's got a little bit of shelf wear on the box, but it is brand new, and I was able to pick this up at a really great price. So it was an ideal opportunity to add one of these to my locomotive fleet. Now the Heljan boxes are always pretty well made, and we said this a lot as well, not just Heljan but Dapol as well produce some really solid boxes, and it does not only protect the model in transit, which is really important if you're getting these things mail order, but it's one of those things, it's a bit like when you slam the door on a Rolls-Royce compared to slamming the door on a Ford Fiesta. The difference is, you can feel the quality, and, it's a statement of the manufacturer and the model itself, in my opinion. Now, I might be talking rubbish. In fact, there's probably people now already typing away, yeah, you're talking absolute rubbish. Who let you on YouTube? But, it's something that I always do think. Now, inside the box, we've got a little bit of the class history here. So this is the British Thomson Houston Class 15 diesel electric locomotive, built originally as part of the pilot scheme, and there was a whole load of different prototypes. The British Transport Commission placed orders for, I think it was around 10 of each, so a lot of locomotive designs that actually went on to be a bit rubbish. Now the Class 16, which outwardly look very similar to these, they didn't get beyond that initial prototype test batch, but the Class 15 did show enough promise that they did order some more, but actually it was just wasted money, as it turned out in the end, because they were one of the very early casualties of the standardization, and they were pretty much all withdrawn en masse, not even lasting long enough to gain BR Rail Blue, although some of them, including this particular example, as you'll see when I get it out of the box, did get the double arrow. And pretty much it was the Paxman engines proved very troublesome. Although the mention of Paxman engines in these does lead me to think, I'm going to have to check on this, and I'm sure that the sound would be incredibly different, but it's whether or not the Hornby Paxman Valenta, I think it's Valenta, TTS sound chips designed ostensibly for the HST, whether that sound is enough like something like a Class 15 perhaps to be able to get away with that. Now I'm guessing probably not, but it's the only budget sound chip that I can think of that at the very least is the right manufacturer for the power plant that was in one of these. Now 3 of them did actually survive a lot longer as carriage heating units, and in fact the single surviving example has survived through virtue of being used in that way through into the 1980s. Just going to pull the model out, and I'm also going to show you we've got a lot of extra detail sprues here. So I'm looking on here, and there are a huge number of different pieces here. We've got brake hoses, and I'm not really quite sure what these are. But actually, it doesn't matter. Oh, they look like sanding boxes for on the bogies. Again, we've got some more brake detail for the buffer beams. We've got head code discs as well. So we've got the shot ones in yellow for when they're closed, and for when they're open and showing white, we've got those as well. And there's another set of bits and pieces here as well. And gosh, it just keeps on giving, doesn't it? There's a lot of extra detail parts that are there for the user to add, and I suspect that these are given in this way partially to keep the costs down, and also partially because it may not get round very, very tight curves with a lot of this detail added. That's usually the case. And if you're wondering where on earth is all of that going to go, well, actually Heljan do provide some details, including tells you the sandboxes risk they will foul as the bogie tries to turn on tighter radius curves. And then we've got all of these different bits and pieces, and we get it all numbered here, just with a photograph of a front of a real Class 15, just to tell you where things need to go. Although it doesn't include some of the other detail parts, that does give you most of them. So I'm going to put that to one side and move on to the main feature, which is, of course, the locomotive. And it comes in the plastic clamshell type packaging. I'm just going to very carefully lift that out, get rid of the packaging, and here we are. This is the Class 15, and of course, for those of you who aren't familiar with this potentially quite obscure prototype, it's outwardly a little bit similar to a Class 20, except we've got the cab is not at one end, and I'm not really quite sure why they chose this route, because actually all they managed to do is give it poor visibility in both directions rather than just one direction, which the Class 20 has. At least that has the ability to have a good field of view out of one, or at the back. I'm never quite sure which is the back and which is the front. I suspect actually logically that would be the front, I guess, with the cab closest to the front, but designed to work equally well in both directions. There is a lot of detail on these. They're not quite as well detailed as some of the more recent models, but it does faithfully follow the prototype, and it just has this strange charm with this off-centered cab, and these very, very tall and austere, almost monolithic front and rear ends there. So again, it's a much chunkier looking locomotive than end-on the bonnet end of a Class 20. You can see there on the cab side that this particular example, D8235, is one that survived long enough to get the BR double arrow, although it did not get a repaint into rail blue, which, as I said before, none of them did. But they were delivered in all over plain green, although we still got this kind of very light, almost leaf green on the cab ends, very reminiscent of the Peckett Works livery. They then later acquired half yellow ends, then full yellow ends, and certainly at least one, the preserved example, when it went on into carriage heating duty, got an all-over Sherwood green, it's called, but it's actually, I think that's the leaf green that you just see in there when it was on carriage heating duties. If we look down from the top there, we've got this grille that we can see all the way through, and there does appear to be a representation of a fan in there, although you can only see the suggestion of it. but I do like that metal grille. Rivet detail is pretty fine, and those bonnet doors there, and picked out in this kind of dark, dirty grey colour, the same colour as the running plate, but it's not obscured the green just down in between there, which I do actually quite like. It does work quite well. We've then got, I believe these to be exhaust vents, and whilst these look to have a similar mesh to the actual fan grille at the front there, they don't appear to be separately applied, and on these they actually do look to be just cast, but it does work quite well. The rest of the locomotive is actually, it seems very Spartan compared with some of the later models, but again, I suppose these were built in a very utilitarian sort of way. Although when we look in through the cab windows, one of the things which does stick out somewhat is that you can see that there's this kind of big white block, which is pretty much up to window height. And I can't help but think that that would have been much improved had Heljan chosen to finish that maybe in black. It wouldn't have stuck out quite so much. It also looks like we can see into this front bonnet area, just make out a kind of indentation. In fact, I can just see the circuit board at the back there. I think this would have benefited an awful lot from having some kind of cab back detail, just to make sure that we couldn't see any of that. But that said, the rest of the detail on there is pretty nice, and I suppose you could always plant in a figure just in those gaps at the side. There is enough space there to be able to put a figure in, and that would go some way to hide some of that. But in more recent models, that's something which Heljan have thankfully gone a little bit more away from. The bogie detail does look pretty good. We've also got those separate sand boxes which can be applied, although I didn't see any information in the actual paperwork as to exactly where those need to go. But the bogies actually do look all right just there on their own. The wheel faces do look a little bit plain, and they're just very, very plain, turned, I think it's a brass alloy, something like that. But there's no actual attempt at modelling the correct pattern of the wheels, but you're not really going to see a lot of that, it has to be said. The brake blocks don't appear to, no, the brake blocks are actually moulded as part of the side frames, but again, it's not hugely noticeable, but I'm just going to bring that to your attention. The buffers on here are sprung, so you can see there, they're all sprung. The red paint there on the front buffer beam is really nice, except I've just trying to focus in on there, and you can just about make out, it's actually very hard to focus, there's a little bit of leaching around the edges of the red. When it comes to the yellow, again, that line is not as sharp as we've come to expect, but it's not too bad. It doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. And what is actually quite pleasing is the front face. I'm going to call this the front. Somebody's probably going to tell me, no, that's the back. But certainly Heljan have captured the look and feel of the prototype pretty well. When we get this running, we'll be able to see all these lights working, hopefully. And you can also see there as well, we've got separately fitted lamp irons too. And of course, as I showed you before, we've also got a full set of the head code discs as well that we can add to this model in whatever formation that we want. These are in the kind of closed position. And what I might actually do, because it does improve the look of these locomotives, at some point I will fit some of these, even though I don't necessarily bother with any of the buffer beam detail. These grills, they are moulded on, but reasonably nicely done. And we've also got this kind of like, it almost looks like a roller shutter type door at the front there, but actually I think they're just louve's where the radiator is behind there. So we've got the fan up on the roof, presumably blasting the air out, and then it would be drawn in through the sides, through the cooler group to just keep the power plant cool. Looking to the other end, again, Heljan have captured that pretty well. We've got those stars on there as well. Really nicely done. Those are quite sharp. Very difficult for this camera to focus on this. We've also got the overhead warning flashes. And these handrails, they do look quite chunky, it has to be said. Just looking there, but they do appear to be... They are separately applied, and they seem to have captured that rather square, chunky look reasonably well. Again, we've got more overhead flashes on there. Nicely done. There is no TOPS data panel, though. I'm not sure. I'm guessing that... in fact, no, I'm pretty certain that this particular example didn't carry one, otherwise Heljan would have added it on. I have seen the TOPS data panel on some of the other livery options. Now, I have had this running on DC, and it did run reasonably well, but this is new old stock, so it has been probably sat in the box for a very long time, and I think this locomotive would benefit from being run in both directions. Now, we're going to be doing a full DCC fitting, so I've got here the Trainomatic wired 8-pin decoder, and this is what you'll be needing. We've got a link in the description box taking you to tramfabrique.nl, who are the UK-based stockists for the entire Trainomatic range. Now, there are some instructions. Now, this isn't going to be a straightforward DCC fitting, I have to say. And just looking through the paperwork, we do get a guide to DCC fitting this, and you can see there's a multi-stage going on, and we're just going to have to work our way through on this. And I will warn you in advance that this is not for the faint-hearted. This is one of the more challenging models that I've tried to DCC fit, and I've done a trial run, and such was the difficulty that you may be able to see the crack that has appeared on this side rail. I actually did cause a little bit of damage to this model trying to get it DCC fitted, but for you guys, I'm going to talk you through it if you do want to replicate this, and you'll need, tooling wise, flathead and a crosshead jeweler's screwdriver, and of course the 8-pin decoder. Now I've chosen from the Trainomatic range the wired 8-pin decoder. Now first up, we need to remove the cab, and what really actually annoyed me a little bit, I have to say, is if we come to the instructions, and you can see there it says to start with, remove the driver's cab, photo 1. Okay, and there it is being held away from the model. Thank you, Heljan, for letting me know how it is actually attached. When you start jiggling it, it doesn't come off in one easy move as it does on the Class 7. In fact, this is the point where some of the other bits and pieces started to get damaged, because I'm now applying a lot of force on there, and I've only moved it a very small crack there, and this is risking damage to the model all the way through. I'm sorry, Heljan, but this is not a good design in the slightest. It really does feel like the DCC ready nature of this has been put in as an afterthought, and this just isn't coming off. I'm risking huge amounts of damage, it would seem, and just trying to just part these two, and there, damage on the running plate, and just trying to move this out. I'm really sorry, but this, like I said, is not for the faint-hearted. It should just come off. And I had such difficulty on the trial run. It pained me to put this all back together just so I could get this on camera. It is, I don't know what is grabbing it, but it just is struggling to come off. And there, you feel a click. Why does it have to be on that strong? It doesn't need to. It feels to me that it's just not designed with ease of access in mind. Finally got that cab off, and you can see in there, we can see the circuit boards, the inside of the bonnet as well. And now a good design would have had the decoder socket accessible maybe in one of these. That would have been a good compromise, but no, it's still hidden away. So we need to remove the battery box, and that exposes 2 screws, which we use the crosshead jeweler's screwdriver. Let's just make sure we don't lose those screws. It does say to remove the interior. Now this interior is glued in. It doesn't come off, not without causing some serious damage. And you can see that it's all the time this is taking some damage. And you can't pull it by the bogies because you'll just damage the bogies. So why is it in this tight? There's no screws holding it. Why does it need to be in this tight? I can't answer that. All I can say is that I managed to get it to move last time just by using the flathead screwdriver, and for some reason it's not wanting to move this time. You can't get your nail in and pull. It's like it's been welded in. Really struggling with this. All the time I can feel the score for DCC Fitting dribbling down the drain. I think we may even have a contender here for worst score ever. And it's not often that I say that. You know, I go out of my way to find something nice to say about everything. And I mean, look, there's no clips, there's nothing. It's just jammed is the best way I can put it. The chassis is jamming on mysterious forces. I have no idea what is holding that in. That rail there is really starting to get on my nerves, it has to be said. There, I just suddenly felt it ungrip. And when I pull this out, look, there's nothing. It just jams. And I really don't understand what they were thinking. Now, I'm going to stop now and I'm going to try and repair that. Right, now we've finally got down inside here. And again, I see mystified, really mystified. What is jamming it in place? I really don't know. It's because it doesn't give you the instructions, you have no way of knowing that there appears to be, as far as I can tell, yeah, there's a couple of clips at the front there. But information is worth so much, and just taking the body off is not giving the end user the information that they require. But here we have our 8-pin decoder socket. We're just going to very carefully just prise that out and put that to one side, and then you can see just partially obscured there, that is marking pin 1. So what I'm going to do is take out our Trainomatic 8-pin wired decoder, and we're looking for the orange pin, which you can just see there, and that is pin 1. So we're going to just line this up and very carefully push that all the way home. And what I'm going to do at this stage is I'm now going to test this chassis, because as you can imagine, trying to get that body off again if there is a problem will drive me insane. So I'm just going to quickly now test and make sure. So I've tested this and everything works okay. And so now it's just a case of reassembling. Now I'm going to just try and fasten the decoder on top there. You can sticky tape it in place, but do be careful, because if you put extra sticky tape over it, then that is going to act as a thermal barrier to stop this from cooling itself down. Now the Trainomatic decoders all come ready heat shrinked, and that also means that there's no real risk of this shorting out on anything. So we're just going to try and fit this into the body. Again, you just want to make sure that we don't get any wires just trying to trap themselves. They are very good at doing this, aren't they? And just make sure the other side is fine. And then what we can do is just very carefully push the body back down into place, and you just hear it click in actually. Next up, we've got those two screws. So it's really just a reversal of that process that we went through. And then the battery box, again, this only goes on one way round, I think. At least I couldn't get it to go on one way. So I'm just going to make sure that we can, might be the wrong way round. So let's just turn that round. And just click this into place. So that's now in place. Not quite. It's not wanting to sit quite flat. And again, you can see how easy it is to damage bits. And now all we've got left is to refit the cab. Now, this does slide most of the way down quite acceptably. Then we reach about there, and you're just going to have to wiggle it, click, and just trying to click in the other side. That takes actually quite a bit of force to get that to seat all the way down, which is probably one of the reasons that it's very difficult to remove out again. And there you have it. The locomotive is back together and DCC fitted. Running quality was exactly what you might expect. It's quite a heavy model, so it does have a lot of grip. It handled all of the track work that I threw at it, including some scale length trains. 4 and even 5% gradients were handled with ease, with no real sign of slipping. It did improve with running, and I particularly liked the effectiveness of the directional lights as well. These can be turned on and off on the F0 key. Overall, the performance was pretty good. I fitted the model with the couplings that come with it. Now, I know that a lot of people have complained about the cranked couplings that come with, it seems, every single Heljan model, but for once actually, these cranked couplings do match up with the rolling stock, so they are just the ticket for this model, which is actually quite a relief because I didn't have any more straight ones to replace with them, and as it turned out, there was no need whatsoever. So overall performance, I was very, very pleased with this. And if you're going to be running this on DC only, then none of that DCC fitting palaver really matters to you. Overall, I thought that this was a pretty solid model, let down perhaps by bad design for getting the decoder in, but everything else about this model seemed pretty good to me. Come now to the scores. First up was build quality, and actually it did seem pretty robust. There's a lot of user applied detail that you can apply if you really want to, but actually the model does look pretty good without it, and it does ensure that it will get round some of those tighter curves that a lot of people have out of necessity on their model railways. Some of the handrails were a little bit delicate when put through that process of DCC fitting, but other than that, actually the rest of the model was pretty robust. So actually I'm going to give this a 9.0 out of 10. Running quality again was pretty good. For a model that's probably sat in its box on a shelf in a model shop for a good number of years, it sprang right into life out of the box without any running in, although the more I ran it, the smoother it got, and I have really nothing to report against this model in this area, so I'm going to give it a 9.9 out of 10. When it came to DCC fitting and innovation, this is where the model did fall down. As you saw, it really was the most challenging DCC fit of any model that I've had so far. It should be an easy fit. There is a lot of space inside this model, and actually sound fitting it wouldn't really pose any problems whatsoever because there is plenty of room for a speaker setup. But that over-tight cab, the lack of proper instructions, that really the instructions that we got given were more infuriating than helpful, and the fact that we ran the risk of damaging the model to get the body off really did drop this score down dramatically. So unfortunately, this looks to be the lowest scoring model that I've reviewed so far. I'm going to give this a 2.0 for DCC Fitting and Innovation. On accuracy and quality of finish, I'm actually really pleased. They've captured the look and feel of the Class 15 really, really well. Of course, when we look into the cab there, that strange white block is a bit of a detraction. I can't help but thinking that having that in black would have been a much better route to go. And having some kind of backhead detail in there just to hide some of that circuitry, or on the other side, that just a void, would have helped a little bit. But from most viewing angles, it's not really a huge issue. So I'm going to give this an 8.2 out of 10. When it comes to value for money, this model does score very well. What you're finding out there is new old stock, and when you compare it to the £200 plus models that we're starting to get through from manufacturers, this model can still be found for under £100. It's a good, solid, reliable runner that would suit a transition era railway, as well as somebody who wants that something a little bit different. There is, of course, one model available on the market in that Sherwood green as one of the carriage heating units, which would prototypically put this model all the way through into the 1980s and beyond, because of course one example is preserved and is currently being rebuilt at the East Lancs Railway. So I'm going to give this model a 9.5 out of 10. That gives us a final score of 38.6. Now you might be thinking that, wow, that is quite a low score compared with some of the other models we've reviewed. But do bear in mind that most of that score was lost in the DCC fitting. It wouldn't take a huge amount to make this model a doddle to DCC fit. And I do hope that when Heljan bring this back into production, they do take on board that and maybe just make it a little bit easier. Perhaps also moulding that cab interior in a much darker plastic so it doesn't stick out as much. Everything else about this model I really was quite pleased with, so it is a model that I can recommend, but with that caveat that you're in for a little bit of a challenge if you want to DCC fit it. That said, there does appear to be plenty of space inside this for a sound installation if that's the route that you want to go. Well, I hope you really enjoyed this video, and if you really like the look of these models that we've been reviewing today, don't forget that we've got some affiliate links down in the description box below that takes you to a retailer where you can pick up your own versions of this really quite excellent Heljan model. Don't forget to like and share as well. Sharing is caring and it really does help out the channel, and if you haven't already done so, do consider subscribing and you'll be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying you take care, happy modelling, bye for now. Today's video is sponsored by Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders designed to be fully compatible with every manufacturer's locomotive. Visit train-o-matic.com to browse the full range and see what they've got suitable for you. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Wayne Johns, Offshore Allen, oorail.co.uk, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Peter Bolton, Brian and Dorothy Mudd, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky107107, George Botterini, Andy Finch, Chris Moss, Robert Steers, MD of San Juan Model Company and Grant Line Products, Sam Yates, John N. from NC, and NYMR-ish. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.